We continue to talk about the life and legacy of Kofi Annan. To help us do that is advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza, who once worked closely with Annan. Ntsebeza was appointed by Annan to be part of an international commission of inquiry that investigated human rights violations in Sudan's Darfur region in 2004. A very good afternoon to you, advocate, and thank you for coming in. Take us back to that period when you had your first encounter with Kofi Annan.
Well, I was sitting in my chambers in Cape Town. I was still practicing from the Cape. And I got this telephone call from New York, and I was told it is from the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is 2004. I couldn't believe it. And to cut a long story short, by the 7th of October, 2004, thereabouts, I was on my way to New York and to the United Nations headquarters, and there Kofi Annan was sitting across the table from me and telling me that the United Nations Security Council, pursuant to Resolution 1564, taken in September, had decided that it should appoint a commission of inquiry into Darfur. So he wanted people who are going to act as commissioners to go into Darfur. He had already found one of the judges who had sat in the first chamber of the International Crimes Tribunal in Yugoslavia. Professor Kasese is now late. He said he had already identified him as the chairman, and he wanted a geographical representation of the people who were going to be commissioners. And so I would be one of those who would be drawn from the African continent.
I want to speak about Darfur because in reflecting on Kofi Annan's legacy, it's been cited by some as one of the areas where he failed or wasn't performing as he was expected to. Speak to us about the difficulty of the work that had to be done in Darfur at that time.
What we were being instructed to go and do, and we had to do, in fact, we were asked to do it in 30 days. And then I said, it's not possible, because we have to be on the ground. You'll remember that I had just come out of the experience of being in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I was head of the investigative unit. So I said there is going to be a need for us to visit the place. We can't just go to Geneva, where we're going to be headquartered, and sit there and do desktop, research. Anyone can do that. We need to go to the place. We need to go to Darfur itself. So, and Kofi Annan did the best he could, to try and get people from various, territories of the world, from Europe, from Latin America, and from Africa. So when I got to New York, he indicated that this is a task that is going to have to be done in 30 days. And then I indicated to him, I believe, I'll talk with the chairman, but I think we need at least 90 days, because part of the time we're going to spend in Darfur itself. So I cannot understand how people can say one person has failed, because the United Nations Security Council, in terms of this resolution 1564 that I've indicated, had asked him to appoint a commission, and he appointed a commission, and the commission delivered. At least we produced in 90 days a report that ran in 274 pages, and we handed it to him, and he took it to the Security Council. Could he have done anything to prevent the serious crimes there? Well, I'm not so sure, but one thing I can vouch for is that when he got our report, read our report, and we made very strong recommendations for the prosecution of at least the president of Sudan, al-Bashir, on the basis that the doctrine of command responsibility puts him where he should be charged for the atrocity that took place there. So I can't understand that, certainly in the Darfur issue, that he could be held responsible for the failure to prosecute certainly those that we had indicated need to be prosecuted, like al-Bashir.
Kofi Annan had admitted more than twice, at least, that the Rwanda genocide was one of his biggest regrets during his time at the United Nations. He may not have been Secretary General at the time, but when you reflect on his legacy, especially at the United Nations, how do you think the current state of the UN, as far as Africa issues are concerned, compares to when he was at the helm?
Well, like one of the United Nations Secretary General is reported to have said, I won't talk about my predecessor and I won't talk about my successor. But if you look at the problems that attended his having ascended to the position of Secretary General, he gets there in 1997. In 1994, there had been a killing of almost 1 million people, 700,000 people in Rwanda in 3 months. And you must remember that even in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, there had been, a genocide, of international crimes proportions. So the world was at war with itself, and no one person. In fact, I remember that it has been said of him that at one occasion he said, I'm an optimist, I was born an optimist, and I hope I will continue to be an optimist. It needed a person who had that view of the world, a person who was steady. And I think I got the impression, those few minutes that I spent with him and we went through, and he successfully, persuaded me to be one of the commissioners to accept the position. I got a sense that this was a person who was level-headed, who knew what had to be done, who knew what is possible, and who understood that some of the ideals that he would have loved to accomplish as a peacemaker, as a person who is a Secretary General in a world that deserved peace, that some of these objectives can never be obtained or attained.
How then does the world best honor a man of Kofi Annan's stature?
In fact, I've said it before, and I'll say it to you, Tembeki, that I think the best way to honor Kofi would be the way in which that same body, the United Nations, honored Nelson Mandela. You will know that there is a date in the calendar of the United Nations which is recognized as a Mandela Day. I think we need a Kofi Annan Day. The AU, the African Union, which is a union of the country, of the continent where he was born, should be the one to take the lead. They should agitate. Certainly, they should have a Kofi Annan Day in Africa, in their calendar. But they should agitate for the acceptance of a Kofi Annan Day in the calendar of the United Nations. I think that would be a well-deserved honor to give to a man of his stature.
Advocate Ntsebeza, I do thank you for your time on this Sunday afternoon. That's Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza talking to us about his experience working with the late United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, who passed away yesterday at the age of 80.